Hello, we will begin our discussion by introducing ourselves and what our current teaching position is, and then we'll discuss the three questions proposed. I will begin. I'm Kelly Van Dyke, and I teach at Forest Hills Eastern Middle School in 6th through 8th grade, self-contained autism.
My name is Celeste Rudd, and I currently teach at Royal Oak High School. I have the self-contained program, which is a mixture of students with cognitive impairments, other health impairments, and autism. And I'm starting my fourth year in that role.
And I am Anna Sneller. I teach in Holland Public Schools. I am an ASD teacher. Last year I did second grade, and this next year it'll be a second, third. Previously, I was an aide in a preschool ASD room in the same building. And so this is just my second year as the lead teacher in the self-contained classroom.
Awesome. Well, it's really nice to meet everybody face to
Nice
face.
to meet you.
And we are going to start with the first question, which is, what values, skills, and funds of knowledge do your group members have that can specifically contribute to the learning community at both the classroom and the school levels? So I will start. When we first got one of our assignments that was the self-assessment, I found out that even though it was definitely what I expected, that my strengths were problem solving, and having positive relationships. That's something that I really, really strive to have. And the one part that I really struggled with though was marking always, because I feel like always is 100%.
Me
And we're
too.
not always 100%
Mhm.
all of the time. So
Mhm.
that was hard for me to mark multiple times. But I do, some of the areas that I want to work on are having some of those difficult conversations with parents, because I like to be so positive that sometimes it's difficult to have those conversations where things aren't the best. Even though I've, prefaced it with the positives, sometimes it's still really hard to have some of those conversations. And I know from the article that we read, that Ennis and Cole, it stated, in order to be effective professionals, we must understand autism from the perspective of the family. And that was on page 283. And I think this increased awareness would just positively impact my ability to have those difficult conversations, because the more we know families, the better the relationships become. So I just want to really continue to do that. The
Mhm.
other thing that I have had a hard time with a paraprofessional this past year is that she has a little bit of a language barrier. Um, her she's, English is her second language. And so sometimes that was really difficult to understand. And so she would want to, and she didn't understand some of those social cues. So a lot of times, like, there would be crisis in the classroom and she would want to try and come and talk to me about something minute, and I would have to just be like, not right now. And sometimes I just pushed it aside. And so I think inadvertently sometimes, especially after reading the Zaffron and Logan article from 2009, I kind of put up a racket, and I realized that. So instead of like really taking the time, I kind of just avoided her a little bit. And then I would complain about how difficult it was to understand her. And then this led to a pattern of just like avoidance, and then just having less communication and not really giving her the opportunity to grow as a professional. The one thing that I did do, and I don't know if you guys have had this experience or not, but I do make some like stuff in writing, and sometimes that helps, because then she was able to read it, and then I think that kind of took off some of the pressure of that language barrier.
That's so
Um,
relatable, Kelly. I've had a situation like that as well where it's just you have so much energy going into trying to solve what's going on with your students, and then some adults are just like less aware or just maybe don't even understand the magnitude of the situation, like you said, and it
yeah.
can be so overwhelming.
And I do feel like the one thing that I have done is, and I don't know if you guys do this either, but I make like a paraprofessional and then a teacher, like, what do I call it? Like a expectation list. So I list the expectations of myself, and then I list the expectations of the parapros. And I actually give it to them as well and say, hey, anything you want to add or take away or you don't feel comfortable with, please do so. And honestly, a lot of that has helped, because I can be like, hey, remember, because I've had some paraprofessionals that sit on their cell phone, and I'd be like, hey, remember in the document that we created together, cell phones aren't appropriate during instructional time. You're more than welcome to when you're at lunch or other places, but not right now. And so I do think that has helped a lot. And then in the area of interpersonal skills, I'm a strong advocate for building those positive relationships. And I do this through consistent communication. I definitely have really good relationships with the family in terms of I text, I call, I email, whatever the best mode of communication is for those parents. That's what I do. And oftentimes I'll send like pictures of students during the day, and things like that, which always, warms their hearts. And then in like the area of professionalism, I really do excel in taking an initiative. I am a go-getter. This is my, next year will be my 17th year teaching. I know what I'm doing for the most part. And so I'm involved in a lot. So I'm part of our PBIS team, our school improvement team, which has been awesome because we run PLC pluses. So it talks a lot about collaboration, which I know we're going to be talking about later. But I'm also like a mentor to the ASD middle school teacher. And that all just helps me to come up with solutions and show those best practices in my teaching. And I also love to share resources.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Kelly.
Yes, you're welcome.
All right. So I guess when reflecting on the inventories that I took, I, like Kelly said, was not super surprised, but had the same thought and even wrote like little notes on my paper about like, well, I try to do this, but it doesn't always happen. And like, there was one about like, being irritated by parents who offer alternatives for managing the classroom behavior of their children. Like, I would say like most, like, I'm not really ever irritated by that, but like there have been a situation or two where I felt like it wasn't like the reciprocal respect for each other's ideas wasn't really happening. So, but for the most part, like I am strong in empathy. And I feel like that plays a really large role in my relationships with the families that I work with, as well as the colleagues that I have. And also I think like professionalism and honesty and kindness are things that I try to keep in the forefront of my mind when I'm having a communication with anyone. And I feel like those three things have helped me with like having a solid partnership. So on Turnbull's page 137, it was talking about how partnership talks about like a relationship with the families, not just the parents, and that we're agreeing to build on each other's resources, ideas, dreams, as appropriate, and like making the purpose of implementing those decisions to directly benefit the student. So I feel like those things can help with facilitating that partnership, that professionalism, the honesty, and the kindness. I do put kind of a lot of energy into making sure that my communication is clear and trying to make sure that it is perceived in the way that I intended it to. I feel like I'm not the best at like making phone calls to parents, and that's something that I really want to improve upon. My planning period for the last few years has been at the end of the day, and like it just was hard to like muster up the energy to like make a phone call, and where I'm a pretty fast typer, and like an email just felt so much easier for me in that moment. But I know that I need to overcome that because some families don't prefer that method of communication. So in that sense, I want to be more adaptable and make sure to be more intentional with that.
But I think that says like a lot about you though, that you've been reflective to say, hey, this is an area that I need to work on. and that you realize that. So I feel like that's the first step, right? In terms of
Yeah.
like understanding who you are and what mode of communication you like best, but then also being willing to adapt that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks for saying that.
Mhm.
Um, I'm trying. It's been like a lot of years of me trying to get better at it, and I feel like I make little progress. Most families do prefer email, so like that
That
does help.
helps.
But let's see here. Oh, so like on the note of like paraprofessionals, um, I was kind of laughing a little. I know I interjected, Kelly, when you were talking about paraprofessionals. I also had a paraprofessional working with me the last 3 years who is also English is her second language, and but she's the opposite of your parapro, in the sense that like if I write things down, which for me, because I'm a fast typer, like it is just easier for me to get it out there and like read it, like not read it, send it to them so they can read
Mhm.
it. And every time that I've done that to try and like make my attention more on my students when I'm at
Mhm.
school, um she always was like, I don't know what this means, I don't know what you want from me. And it's like never like a concise conversation with this person. It tends to there's tends to be tangents, and sometimes it's just hard to find the energy and the patience, like you were saying, to make sure that they can give those supports. And I really loved the idea of making sure like there's a list of like responsibilities, like this is what
Mhm.
Sorry about that.
Anna's lights went out.
Yeah.
um like having like this is what you can expect from me and this is what I can expect from you. And I feel like this might be the first year that I really feel confident in like constructing something like that, because I feel like paraprofessionals collaboration has like just been the hardest part of getting adjusted to being in a self-contained classroom. So
For sure.
um
I think the one thing that I do, and this is kind of off a tangent as well, but again, building those relationships and making sure your team is strong. Like, and even if it's just like little things, but like there have been days where I'm like, guys, we had a really rough day yesterday. I'm gonna bring in Starbucks. Or guys, we had a really rough week. I'm gonna bring in lunch. So just things like that too, that they know that I appreciate them. And that
mhm.
tends to build some of those relationships as well.
Community builds
Yeah, and
community. That's
Mhm.
so nice. That's a really nice
yeah.
idea. I like
And
that.
just even acknowledging all the things, I do feel like I got to the end of the day and I said, I think I said thank you too much, because at some point it's a person's job. But
Right.
I do say thank you and I try to be as specific as possible, especially if it's a behavior I want to repeat from one of the aides who works with me. And so I'm very specific. Thank you for this. And it's
Yes.
helped. It's definitely helped our relationship. But some at some point I'm saying it too often.
Yep.
I relate to that too. And I feel like my version of that is I appreciate you. I feel like I say that all the time, and that's not specific, and that's not expressing like what do I want them to do more of. So I love the idea of you guys are giving me really tangible things that I can bring back to help me. And that was one of the things I wrote in the first reflection was like paraprofessionals sometimes like we can't live without them. We need them.
Mhm.
Right.
And like our whole like special education like kind of stands on their backs, and they in our district they're not really like compensated the best. And then you have people who don't really like care, but then you have a lot of people who do. And it's like you need a whole hour a day to be
Mhm.
able to meet their needs as it relates to the students. And there's just not time for that. So thank you for
Absolutely.
these good ideas. I'm excited about it.
Celeste, do you have anything
Um,
to share for that first question?
let's see here. I wrote a lot more, but I'm kind of long-winded, so we can move
Anna,
on. I feel like
do you wanna
I
have
know
your
there's
turn?
so many times you guys are talking that I want to interject. So then instead of writing notes, which would have been smart, I'm like, okay, I'm going to touch on that. I'll touch on that later.
Yes. Yes.
But so taking the self inventory at this point, like I think that any day my answers could change, any month, any school year, my answers can change. So a lot of my responses reflected the fact that this was my first year in this new position. I've been in schools, I've been teaching for 14 years, but I was a middle school math teacher and now I'm in second grade in a self-contained ASD classroom. So it's just a lot of news. And so one of the things actually I'll touch on right away is in Turnbull's writing, Families, Professionals, and Exceptionality. Chapter 7 that we read this past week, it had the 7 principles of partnership. And one of these is the professional competencies as one of the 7 principles. And I know we're supposed to talk about our strengths, but I'm going right into it and I'm going with one of my weaknesses. I feel like that is an area that really impacted how I collaborated this year. So it made it so that I was very willing. I'm always willing to problem solve and work together with everybody, but it made it so that I was like, please collaborate with me this past year. So pulling in my SLP and my OT, and I'm fortunate I have 4 other ASD teachers in the K-5 building. So I have a lot of resources. And so I was constantly wanting to collaborate, problem solve. And you had this student last year, tell me your secrets, and talking to parents, talking about what works and using them as the experts. So definitely that professional competency feeling like not there yet, don't have the experience. That was a barrier in some ways, but it also made me much more eager to work with other people and to see the families as experts. What that hindered though was, while I'm like very willing to talk to parents about this and that, I felt like I wasn't as open with some of my strategies because I don't feel like they are super grounded yet, or I wasn't as open about my day-to-day like behavior plans and things like that. If it was a formal behavior plan, of course we met and it was a team decision. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to going into a second year of this, having a lot more knowns ahead of me. Like you guys are talking about parapros. I didn't even think about that. That's such a huge part of the collaboration this year. And better or worse, right? Like that's a huge part of what we're doing as when we're working with others in this job. And that is a huge thing that I want to work on. It's visuals and expectations, because you have your people who are naturally gifted with this and wonderful, and I learn from them. And then you have your people who are needing a lot of support, don't take the modeling or the suggestions. And so having a lot of those visual supports for them. And whereas we're talking about posting our expectations, that way when we have substitute teachers in, right, which we have all the time, that can be helpful as well. So thank you. I wasn't even on my mind. Yes, go Kelly.
But I totally resonate with you because I taught K through 2 and actually K through 5 at one point in a mildly cognitively impaired classroom. So that was like the bulk of my career. And then I felt a little burnt out in that position. So I tried second grade, and I can resonate with you. When I went into second grade, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I hate this. This is awful. Like you didn't say you hated that but it was really uncomfortable for me because
it's the first year teaching.
Like I didn't have the knowledge or the anything. And then when I've been in the autism room for a year and a half, I at least felt more in my comfort zone, just because of my special ed background. But I can resonate that feeling of like, like I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure this thing out.
Yeah. We are
100%.
14 years, 10 different schools. I've had so many first year teaching experiences. It's just, I'm very excited about the second year going in.
Well, and it'll feel,
I jump around, but yeah.
I think it'll feel so much easier too as time goes on. And I think like every year that you can put into it, that it's like you're that much more prepared for the next year because you have so much more of those different problem solving opportunities.
But having that different experience in those different schools and working, like I've been the lead teacher, I've been interventionist, I've done aid work now too. And I think that's really helped in my ability with being adaptable and how I'm communicating things. what I'm communicating, and just working with a wide variety of people. We taught in a lot of different, taught in different countries and different cities. And so we've had experience working with a lot of different communication, methods of communication. What is new to me, though, is I don't have that deep special ed background. So this is a whole other culture that I am really, I feel very humbled by in everything I'm learning, because I felt like, oh, I've had such a diverse experience. This is its own wealth of diversity. And so I feel like I'm learning a lot about, I mean, just in these readings, but of course, in my work with my students and families, learning a lot about the diversity within a small group of people. Like, I don't work with that many students, but
Absolutely.
there's
Yeah,
so
the
many
spectrum
differences.
is huge, right? Like,
Yeah, and what the families bring to it. So,
yep,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Are we ready to go on to question
Let's move
2?
on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So question 2 is, what skills have been refreshed thus far in this course that might help you to better collaborate with team members, students, and families? So the one thing, I feel like the Turnbull article is fantastic and it has so much good
Mhm.
information in it.
Did, yeah.
And I think one of you touched on it previously, but those 7 principles of partnership, they've
Mhm.
really that really opened my eyes a bit. And I focused on professional competence and then communication, and we've touched on that a little bit in the previous question. But in the communication principle, the article states, I try my best to have like quality communication, and make it as concise as possible. And I know, Celeste, you said that was kind of a strength of yours, that you really look to say, okay, I want to be concise and make sure I'm saying the things that I want to say.
Mhm.
And the article also talked about that things that would be beneficial would be effective communication, would be being clear and
Mhm.
friendly, which again is an area of strength for me. I'm very outgoing. I like to share fun things that happen during the day. I'm kind of an open book, so I will pretty much answer any questions you have, which then relates to being fairly friendly. Um, and then I do really try to be a good listener. So to actively hear people, I often like to use some of that pausing and paraphrasing. And I know that's part of that collaboration work as well.
Mhm.
But I want to be able to understand what the families communicate with me. And the one I had one family that one of the communication barriers was like English as a second language, and what I found is that texting was the perfect way to go because it was the
Mhm.
easiest way to
It's
communicate.
like,
And I know some people can use like the Google Translator, they can translate
Mhm.
what has been texted. And that's been really helpful as well. But just knowing
Oh
those
yeah.
families and knowing that's what they needed. Um,
Mhm.
and then in the area of professional competence, I set extremely high expectations for my students, in terms of even their ability to pause and paraphrase, which sounds crazy, but when you really teach them a procedure on how to do it, they're able to do it, even if it's something as simple as, or even like questioning, like, do you agree with me? Like thumbs up or thumbs down. And so
Mhm.
I do set those really high expectations in terms of what I'm teaching on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm.
And I think the other strength that I have is understanding the curriculum from the gen ed perspective and then also from the modified curriculum perspective. Um, and so my students, during math and reading that I keep for self-contained, we're focused on that modified curriculum, but they've got their learning objectives. They know how they're going to master that learning objective. And right now we're working on like self-rating and like, how did they do? Did they need help? Were they able to do it independently?
mhm.
And things like that. And then just understanding the gen ed perspective, that I do have some students who are on a full modified curriculum. And then I have some students who are pushed out for like 1 or 2 classes in the gen ed classroom. And then I have some students that are in the gen ed classroom for 50% of their day. So it's important for me to understand that gen ed curriculum in addition to that modified curriculum. And I've done that just through professional development, reading relevant books. And I actually
Mhm.
had a parent whose child is more on that line of like the Asperger's syndrome, and she's reading a book right now from Temple Grandin, and I was like, can you please pass it on to me after? Like, it's about visual learners, and I'm like, will you pass it on to me after you're done?
Oh yeah.
And so just understanding that sort of thing. Um, and then, according to Atkin and Tozer, on pages 230 to 232, Another way to collaborate with families is to understand and get to know the sibling of the child with autism. And that is so key for me. It helps us to understand like the family dynamics. And it gives teachers a way to connect with students because families are obviously a big part of students' lives. And the studies did find that those studies were really impactful for me, especially because I have students that actually we have a really robust peer-to-peer program. And so our 7th and 8th grade students can actually take it as an elective. And I do have a couple students that have siblings. So gen ed students who are coming into my classroom that actually have siblings with autism at home. And so some of the things that we were reading about, I was like, oh my gosh, that will be great for me to implement with even my gen ed students. So looking, at it from two totally different perspectives.
Yeah, I'm gonna interject right there
Yes,
because I
please,
read
please.
that in your notes and I was like, yes, of course. Like I do. I've had students who came up to me from a peer-to-peer group who
Yep.
say why they got interested in joining peer-to-peer. It's because they have a much younger sibling who has autism. And so I loved reading that in yours and
Mm-hmm.
reflecting on the students I've worked with. We have high schoolers who come in and support the
Oh, that's
classrooms
great.
for future
I
ed
love that.
program. And
Yes.
often they're drawn to working in an ASD classroom because of a family member. So I love that you noted that. And then I'm just going to keep interjecting and then I'll go back to
Yes,
you.
please do. Yes.
The same writing by Atkins and Tozer. I just took the quote that was actually quoted from another source, but early understanding and explanations of autism help siblings accommodate their brother or sister's behavior in the longer term. And that was quoted from a Ross and Cuskely writing in 2006. But I just really liked that. I mean, we talk about those early interventions with students, but you think about the family, and it's really an early interventions that help the whole family to understand. One of our aides who works here, she has students who are in her own children who are in different programming, and she makes a point of going around her neighborhood and explaining the strengths and struggles of her children.
That's
And she has
amazing.
a yard full of
Wow.
kids. Like, she's always bringing the kids all, having all these fun activities, and now they're
Yes.
super comfortable with her
That's
children. So
so
just that
cool.
information that we share with the school, like you said, with gen ed and the
Yep.
siblings, it's super helpful for
And the one thing that I like, it's an actual quote like you have, but it totally relates. It says, sibling relationships are more than simply being of or belonging to a family. They are dynamic and presupposing to definite experience fixed in time and space. This would not only maximize the disabled siblings' quality of life, but also ensure a more productive and fulfilling context for family relationships. And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, because some of the families in the article were like, I like I take them on. I care for my siblings. They had a relationship, really strong relationships. It was reciprocal. It was loyal, and they accepted that responsibility. But then on the same token, when they don't have like that voice and choice, some of them would like move far away just to like get
yeah.
away from that and create
Yes.
distance because it is a lot. And if they don't have a say and they're not
Yes.
treated as like an equal, sometimes it is a lot on the siblings. So just to understand that
Yep.
portion of life.
I felt
Um,
like that same part actually really stuck out to me, and I put down a quote from that reading about like siblings of individuals with autism express frustration at the perceived lack of practitioners' interest. So like
mhm.
listening, like giving siblings the say, as like you said, it's a dynamic. It's not like you're just sharing a house and sharing parents. Like that individual is growing up in a situation that is forming their life, and I feel like I have a high school group of students, so I feel like a lot of times, like I've always just kind of gone towards like who are the main contacts on my star, which is like the program that our
Right.
school uses for our
Yep.
databases. And I had a student my first 2 years in this role who their sister was responsible for pretty much everything for them. Like the sister was in her early 20s, but like if he ever had to be picked up from school because he was sick, like she was the person who got called. She was in all of the IEP meetings, and there was like they were are Albanian, so she was also kind of helping with like language barrier for the mom, and it just really opened my eyes to something I hadn't experienced before, that like these siblings
And
have
that could be like
such
a cultural thing
a
too,
role.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yep. And understanding that. And I think the one thing that I loved from the Morgan article too, it was on page 7, but they talked about all of the things that they gave like kind of like tips for the siblings, like
Mhm.
opportunities to meet other siblings and have shared experiences,
Mhm.
having special time with parents away from the sibling with special needs, um,
Yes.
just having circles of support for the family. And I think because this is totally typical, at least I have 2 children and I feel like this can this totally totally relates, but acceptance that it's okay to express dissatisfaction with sibling, right? Like
Yeah.
they are a person, they are a sibling, like let's treat them as so. But I think that's important when you probably feel a lot of pressure as a sibling, like I have to take care of them, I have to protect them. Um, and I just can't even imagine
Yeah.
that happening.
Well,
And I
even
think
going back to the peer-to-peer talk, we talk so much in peer-to-peer that it's a two-way street. Like you're not their helper, you're not their teacher.
you're their
It's
friend, like,
friendship.
Mutually beneficial.
And
yep,
so thinking about that as a sibling, I know that's idealistic, but yeah, having some of those
absolutely.
conversations.
And then the other one, the Higgins, Bailey, and Pierce article on page 133, they do talk about like caregivers and sometimes how there's lower marital happiness, and family adaptability and family cohesion. And I can see how that would definitely happen with some of those
Mhm.
stressors. Um, there was no like there was no evidence of like lower self-esteem with the families. But they also reported that like personal coping strategies didn't affect the family's adjustment to marital happiness and all of those things. But I can see like how much we do need to support our families and how much it means to families when we are supportive.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
even like doing things outside of like the school day, like I go to their band concerts, or I do that,
Mhm.
and I think just getting to know them and being a support for those families is huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Celeste, is there anything else that you got from question 2 that we haven't covered already that you want to touch on?
Well, I mean, things that we talked about earlier in the conversation, like you guys were talking about how, like paraphrasing and summarizing in conversation and trying to make sure that everyone's on the same page. I thought that that's something that I have been refreshed upon and like want to do better with my collaboration with parents and with other professionals. I definitely do that with like open-ended and closed-ended questions with students to make sure, and like what you were saying, Kelly, about like taking a gauge on like, do you understand what I'm saying? Are my directions clear? Give me a thumbs up if you know what to
Mhm.
do. Like, so, but I guess in my mind, I was thinking like, well, that's what I utilize with my students, but that's also something that can be beneficial in all communication. It doesn't just have to be with the students that I'm serving. So,
Correct.
that's something that I wrote down as that I want to improve in that area and make sure that I'm using that across the board in my communication. And then another thing that I thought was really cool, again from the Turnbull article, I feel like I've pulled from that one a lot, or the chapter 7
Mhm.
specifically, that they outline all, like it was so explicit of every facet of the relationship and to just how to just be the most supportive and collaborative professional you possibly can be. And I loved, I feel like sometimes when people bring problems to me, specifically my co-teacher or other team members, um, but sometimes I get a little bogged down in like, okay, I got to fix this problem. But they had in this chapter the framework of how to approach problem solving together. So I like want to print this off and like have it on the table. And it would also be good in like an IEP setting if there was a problem, but develop a vision, agree on a specific goal, brainstorm options for addressing the goal. So evaluate what, like the different options and how they're going to benefit or possibly not help. Select the most appropriate one, specify an implementation plan, come back and reevaluate, like, how is this working, and modify it as needed. And I thought that that was
Actually,
a
that
great
was amazing.
thing to have.
And I actually wrote that down, kind of in reference to question 3, but I did write that down as well, like how amazing,
Mhm.
because I think sometimes when I've worked with difficult coworkers who might not do their job well, or they like to cut corners, or they're always negative. I think the one really great piece of that, and having those steps really spelled out for you, is there's really no wiggle room. And you
Yeah.
can't really just sit there and
Hmm.
complain. You can just keep going back to the
Mhm.
question. And since it's so concrete, it helps
Mhm.
to eliminate any of the side conversations, or the negativity, or the excuses, or the spiraling of
Exactly.
conversation. Because
Mhm.
sometimes I'd leave those conversations and I'd be like, what just happened? Like, how did this conversation spin into something we weren't even talking about? So I think
Exactly.
having a concrete step like that would be really helpful.
And I feel like when I get in those situations where there's a veering from the topic, or it takes a negative turn, or it's not productive, I struggle with finding the words to bring us all back to why the purpose of the conversation, and to have, like you said, like, have these, like, explicitly clearly written out, like, this is what we need to be doing so
Yeah,
that this is
absolutely.
productive. That kind of removes, like, the anxiety that I have around being in that situation where I feel like I don't know how to get everyone back on track. So,
Yep,
yep.
absolutely. Anna, did you
Yep.
have anything else to add that we haven't covered yet?
I've cycled a little bit about in this question, my actual answer, I answered in the first question just because they kind of fluidly went together with the professional
Yep.
competency.
They all
Um,
kind of blend together
they
for
do a
sure.
little bit, yeah, which is
Yeah.
great. Makes the
Yeah.
conversation. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, so much of it I love about working in uh, a job that works with people is those building the relationships.
Mhm.
Um, and the last question, I'm gonna just jump into that to
Absolutely.
start us off.
Yep.
Things that are the most challenging for me because I love collaboration, I love working with other people and communicating as much in person as possible. The biggest challenge is time. I have struggle I struggle
Yes,
to have work-life balance anyway.
Hmm.
And then when you're
for sure.
let alone, like, I don't know that I always get a lunch break or planning time. So, finding time is the biggest barrier for me whilst trying to stay, human. And so that really is my
Relatable.
biggest struggle. And I love reading about, um, this whole piece with families. I mean, going into this course, I really was thinking about collaboration with colleagues. That was on my mind.
Hmm.
And the fact that we've done so much with families, it makes me want to think
Mhm.
about how I can get more time with the families because they show up so nicely for IEPs. And I love when I get some families who do pick up, drop off. It gives me a quick chance to chat. But there's a lot of families who I don't see and who don't show up to parent teacher conferences, and we do these peer to peer events, for example, that are really catered to our students, and they can't make it to that. And there's no blame on them at all. But I do want to find more ways to get that contact with families, meeting them in the middle. Luckily, I live here in Holland. It's not a big community, so I'm around. My kids attend the school, so I'm very around. And so it helps me just to naturally see people and build those relationships because, like you said, those tough conversations are tough no matter what, but they're made better through those relationships that you've built with the family.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, for sure.
and yeah, so really getting that time to be with them. And I also looked at that same list of strategies to help the siblings
Hmm.
from Atfield, Living with Autistic Spectrum Disorders, a guide for parents, care, caregivers, and siblings. And so from page 8, it talks about those opportunities to meet other siblings. And so that's where I was really thinking about how are ways that we can get families together. We have some barriers, right, with FERPA, right? Like we can't, there's certain
Right.
things we can't even bring our families in for certain events because of FERPA. Because I don't know how the schools you guys are with, but we have some just strict, like, can't have them volunteering in your classroom, for example. Um, but those are so thinking about ways that I can do more to get people together. And so I don't know if you guys have, and I just need to look too, but lists of events that are like Camp Geneva, for example, is a camp in our area that I don't know the background and I wasn't pushing it, but some of my students were able to attend it because they had a week that was specifically more welcoming to students who have different needs. So I just want to know more about those kinds of events that I can put out there for my families.
Absolutely. And I
So
think
that's
in that case, like if it was in the summer, I could be like, absolutely, I'll go show up there, meet me there, I'll be there.
yeah, great.
And I know
Mhm.
that like at least at the middle school level, the one thing that I've really enjoyed doing is they do Special Olympics. And so I've
Cool.
shown up to basketball games or I've, where they're
Yeah.
participating.
Mhm.
And so that part's really, really fun. And again, it's harder at the elementary level, I think, too, when they're so much
Yeah.
younger, to find those
Mhm.
opportunities. But yeah, definitely, I would like to, and I think that was one part in one of my reflections actually previously. Like I know all the resources within my school for parents and families, but I don't know a whole lot about the
Yeah.
resources
The
outside of school.
community.
So
Mhm.
Mhm.
that's something that I really would like to strive to learn and understand more about, because I think it
Mhm.
would be again really beneficial and for parents to meet up with each other,
Yeah.
which I think
Mhm.
is huge. And I think even though we've been talking about families, the one thing that I did notice too is, because that third question was, like, what are some challenges that your group
Mhm.
members may need help with? Consider how you could approach, or offer assistance, and like, really, what does it look like in an authentic setting? And I feel like, especially in the area of, like coworker, I know the article, the high leverage, teaching practices on page 5, it talks about, how when true collaboration occurs, the effect size on student achievement is actually a 0.93, which is crazy high compared to what it would be if you just worked alone. So if
Yeah.
you can try and place like the importance on collaboration regarding the students, then sometimes it can take the pressure off of a teacher who might not feel as equipped to do everything. And if you work together in a true collaboration, it can put the focus back on the student. And so that's something that I
Mhm.
really took away from that article as well. Um,
Absolutely.
but it also takes trust, right? Because a lot of times teachers, especially if they don't know, they're going to be like, well, I'm not going to admit what I don't know. So oftentimes I do open up because I lead my PLCs at school. I always, like, if we're going to talk about something tough, I'll be like, hey, this is where I'm struggling. So I kind of like open up myself first,
Mhm.
just to say, this is where I need some support. And that often will lead to other
Definitely.
people opening up and not feeling like they have to be perfect. Cause so many times I feel like that's how we feel like we have to be.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but when that effect size is a 0.93, that's something to be said, that
Absolutely.
and will be so much higher. And I think that's super important.
So you said you have irregular PLCs. How big is your PLC group?
So this past year, because I've only been there a year and a half, so I came in
Mhm.
halfway through the year, not this past school year, but the year before. The classroom was a mess. The teacher quit halfway through, like very, very tough kids. Um, and so this year, our PLC has been myself and then the other middle school ASD teacher, and then 2 of the resource room teachers at the middle school. Next year, because I'm on like our school improvement team, I am asking to have, because it's interesting. My building is middle school and high school together, so that we're in the same
Wow.
building, but it's like separated. Um,
Mhm.
Mhm.
it's like in the same building, but like different sections are, the lowest level is high school, middle level is middle school, top floor is middle school. But with that being said, I've asked my principal, I said, can we please have our PLC to be all the ASD teachers, middle school and high school? Because that's going to be a lot more worth our time and our collaboration to do
Helps
that.
that
Because
vertical
resource,
alignment too.
so
Yeah.
yeah, and so we have 2 middle school ASD teachers and then we have 2 high school ASD teachers. So my hope is this year we can run our PLCs with the 4 of us, just to create some scope and sequence and to make sure that we're
Mhm.
all doing what we need to do.
Yeah. This was our first year. I asked because this was our first year doing PLC, and I love that we have this time.
Hmm.
But we have all of our ASD teachers, all of the aides, all of our ancillary teachers or staff members, and we're talking like a group of 25
That is
people, and
too
we
many.
can't it's been helpful for helping with some of those discussions about AIDS roles and what are our
Yep.
goals in the program. But I really want to encourage this next year that we trim it down because we
Or
can't.
even I feel like okay, let's take 30 minutes out of our 55 minutes or an hour, like 30 minutes to meet as a smaller group and then come back and meet as a whole
Whole
group
group.
for 15 minutes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or have some
Yeah.
sort of, yeah, but that's tough. Holy
That's
cow.
So
especially because I was
the,
looking forward to that time so much. But yeah,
And I feel like
yeah,
part of that PLC plus too, like the part where we're talking about a lot of the the collaboration piece is that like you're supposed to be looking at student data, looking at intervention strategies, and all those
mhm,
things that you might not be able to do in a group of 25.
no.
Although
absolutely.
I do have to say, I would love to have my parapros at least there like once a month. Like that would be helpful
That
Yeah.
would
for
be
sure.
amazing to have that time to collaborate with the parapros.
Hmm.
For our school, our PLC, so a lot of the special education teachers, basically all of them are co-teaching in gen ed classes. So, um, but instead of meeting with those PLCs, our department head always wants all of us to meet together, and they're all talking about like personal curriculums and things that are applicable to kids on a diploma track where like all of my students are on a certificate of attendance. So a lot we have our PLC time on Wednesday mornings, and like a lot of times I feel like this is so frustrating to not have this time feel like it's meaningful for me. Like I wish that there was time for me to collaborate with like the middle school self-contained teacher, or even with my co-teacher who I'm with a lot. But it just, I don't know. I just wish that it was more meaningful and more intentional with like how we're spending that time. And that has been a real hard thing for me to grapple with. um,
Absolutely. I hear you. I feel like time is
Time,
always the
right?
issue. Time.
You
time,
guys
it
didn't solve this
really
for
is.
me, but that's okay.
We'll try next time.
Right.
Well, one thing I was gonna say, Anna, about like wanting to have more time with your families, like this year I got permission to so Inside Out 2 came out, obviously.
Yeah.
And I have a student in my class she has named herself the movie girl. And sometimes for our community-based instruction, like we've gone to the theater before, and she was really set on us going to see Inside Out 2 together. So I reached out to parents and I just threw out the idea of like, hey, if your kids are interested and you're interested in seeing this movie, maybe we could find a time where we could all just meet at a local movie theater. And like that
Yeah.
doesn't really provide time for you to have like FaceTime because it's
A
a movie.
but
But it's building that relationship.
but it's showing
Yeah.
you care and you're willing to go
Mhm.
above and beyond. Like
And it
Yeah.
was really nice to see like all the parents, like, and really, like you were saying, Kelly, from Unified Sports or from Special Olympics, like they already have like such a close knit community among them because a lot of them have played sports for Unified Sports for a lot of years. So it's nice how that can kind of like also play back into the classroom as well. So that could be something you could do.
And it brings the families together too when they go to
Yeah.
support. Yeah. Well, good.
absolutely. All right.
Ideas.
Well, I think we
Yeah.
answered all three of our questions.
Yeah.
So good to see you guys and
Yes,
good luck next year.
that's right.
Yeah.
Chatting, but yeah.
All
All
right.
right. Thanks,
Thanks,
you guys.
ladies. Bye.
Thank